Hey, what is up guys? It's Stan here back with another video. In this one, we're going to be taking a look at two very similar but slightly different Razer keyboards. I've got the Huntsman V2 and the Huntsman V2 Analog. Both of these are full-size keyboards, and both of these are very similar but slightly different, and they're slightly different in key areas. So we'll take a look at what's different, why you would pick up one versus the other, and just my general thoughts about owning both of these keyboards for a handful of months now. So let's get into it. A quick little recap. Late last year, around September, I picked up the V2 Analog, the Huntsman V2 Analog, and had used it for probably 4 or 5 months before I realized I needed another keyboard for a second computer. I liked the feel of the Huntsman, the size and everything, so I picked up the regular V2 because I realized I didn't need the analog of the V2 Analog. It was just wasn't useful for me in my gaming. I'm not saying that it's not any good, just not useful for me. So that's why I picked up the regular Huntsman V2. Now let me bring you a little closer and just show you the similarities first, and then we'll talk about the differences. Physically, both of these keyboards are very similar. You've got the full-size layout with the number pads, the key locations are in the exact same locations, and even the keycaps are completely interchangeable. Both of these keyboards have the double shot PBT keycaps, and they feel basically the same. However, that's kind of where the similarities end, because let's first talk about the wrist rest. The V2 Analog wrist rest has the LED strip built into the wrist rest, and there is a connector on the wrist rest where it slots in to get power, and once it's connected, you'll see that the ring around the wrist rest lights up. This LED also extends to the body of the V2 Analog, so you get a really nice glow, and you can see this is cycling through different colors to match the key switch colors. On the regular V2, there is no LED strip. In fact, there is no LED strip on the entire keyboard. Because there is no LED strip, there's no need for electrical connection points, so this side edge is completely smooth. Now here's the problem with this wrist rest. This wrist rest is still magnetically attached, just like the V2 Analog. However, because there's no notch, the wrist rest will be able to float a little bit. And as you're typing or gaming, what you'll find is sometimes this wrist rest will move left or right. It won't move so much that it will completely dislocate, because the magnet does have a little bit of force keeping it in the general vicinity. However, it's not always completely aligned. I would have liked to see some kind of notch here and notch here, just to align the wrist rest so that it doesn't move that much. From a tooling perspective, they could have just done the exact same notches here, just without the electrical connections, and it would have locked right in, but I think that's a missed opportunity. The wrist rest padding is also a little bit different. The V2 Analog is a little bit plushier, a little bit thicker. The regular V2 is very similar. It's got the same type of material on the top, or the suede leather, false leather material is the same, but the filling is a little bit more memory, or it kind of indents and stays indented for longer compared to the Analog. Small little difference, both are very comfortable, and both, I would imagine, should hold up pretty well. Again, this is a 6-month-old keyboard that I had used daily for, actually I still use daily. And you can see this is a brand new wrist rest. This is 6 months old. I would imagine you should be good for a couple years at least. Next, moving to the media keys here. Again, the media keys are the same, but there is a difference in the volume wheel. This volume wheel has a knurled edge. It's made out of metal, and it's kind of chamfered. On the regular V2, this is also made out of metal, but the volume wheel is a little bit bigger, and it's got straight edges. Both are functionally the same and operate the exact same way. Moving to the top of the keyboard, you'll notice that the regular V2 only has one connector, USB connector, coming out of the keyboard. The V2 analog, on the other hand, has two connectors, both of which these connectors are built into the keyboard, so they're not detachable. If you bought the smaller version of the keyboard, I think it's the 10 keyless, don't quote me on this, but it's either the 10 keyless or the mini, that is USB detachable, USB-C detachable. These are not. Analog has two of these cables because it's got a USB pass-through. The regular one does not. So this is kind of a bare bones keyboard, the regular V2. Really, it's got the same keycaps, or it's got the same design, but it doesn't have the LED bits. It doesn't have the USB pass-through. You know, if you're just looking for a good keyboard without the frills, this is the one to get. The biggest differentiation between these two keyboards is the switch. The V2 analog switch is well, it's an optical analog switch, while this switch right here on the regular V2, these are linear switches, or equivalent to the Cherry MX Reds. These are, I want to say these are the pink red. No, these are these are also Razer Red. A little bit different from the MX Cherry Reds, but they're linear and they're relatively light. And I vastly prefer these switches over the V2 analog. What you'll find in the V2 analog is they're a black color. Can you see? Yeah, there you go. The analog switches are also smooth, but not as linear, meaning the pressure at which you need to push the key all the way down varies from very light to very heavy, or significantly heavier than the Reds. I'll make sure to put the actuation force on the screen below. I can't remember it off the top of my head, but these feel like MX Cherry black switches, while these are very much traditional red switches. The other difference between these two keyboards is that the V2 has the foam dampening, and boy, do the foam dampening make a huge difference. That was actually one of the major reasons why I picked up this keyboard rather than another version of the analog keyboard, because even though the switch designs are very similar, or similar enough, both Razer design, both linear or not linear, but smooth, without any clickiness, the foam on the bottom, or just a simple layer of foam, really dampens the keyboard keys. And you know, the lavalier mic's about a foot away, and you could hear it sounds really good, versus the bottoming out of the V2 analog. Personally, I much prefer the key switches on this keyboard than this one. So maybe in the future, we'll get an analog version with the dampening foam. Maybe not, I don't know. I wouldn't see why they couldn't update this with the dampening foam, but the dampening foam makes the typing experience so much better. If you haven't tried it, I would recommend you guys going to your local tech store, Best Buy or wherever, and just give these a try. They feel really good. The last little bit to talk about is just some food for thought about which one to get. Both of these keyboards are in the ballpark, actually the same price range now that they're both been out for half a year to a year now. And you can have these, I think, right in the $150 to $160 or $70 range. The V2 analog used to be significantly more expensive. They've been slashed to, what is the actual price now? Let me take a look real quick. Analog can be had for $150 on Amazon. The newer V2 regular one is $169. So actually, the no frills basic version of the Huntsman V2 is more expensive than the V2 analog. That just shows that I guess people like this keyboard more than the analog, even though the analog is supposed to be a higher or better version of the Huntsman keyboard. Some other last thoughts here. I would have liked to see a detachable USB-C connector. You know, being able to replace the keyboard cable with your own custom cable, that would have been nice. Again, we've talked about the wrist rest, being able to have it locked in without it floating around, that would have been nice. And you know, I actually do kind of like the LED ring around the keyboard. I don't know how much it would have actually cost additionally to get that LED on this keyboard, but the LED on the wrist rest, the LED around the entire keyboard, it does look nice when you're not using it just sitting on the table here. I guess I'm a sucker for the RGB LEDs. That's why, you know, you've got RGB on the mice, RGB on basically everything. I just think it's pretty cool. Overall, both of these are great keyboards. If you want to learn more about the analog keyboard, I do have another video. I'll link it in the description down below or up here or somewhere, and you guys can check out that. I'll also make sure to link both of these keyboards in the description down below for your convenience. And if you like this video, make sure to hit that like button. And as always, my name is Stan, and I'll see you guys in the next one.